What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video I'm going to be building a $1,000 gaming PC build that you can actually put together right now. I'm going to run you through all the components we chose with live up-to-date pricing to show you how it's done before booting the system up and testing it out with the biggest titles out there. Make sure to get subscribed though if you aren't already, and let's jump into it after a quick word from today's video sponsor. Today's video has been made possible by Karma, an app and Chrome extension that makes sure you never miss another coupon code or price drop ever again. I've personally found Karma great for tracking down hard to find PC parts in 2021. Karma adds a little button on the right hand side of your web browser that you can conveniently drag up and down and position exactly how you like it. You can use this button to save some of your favourite items on the web. What's more, Karma lets you sort into multiple different lists. So you can actually, plan out your next PC build or your next kind of tech wish list and never miss a price drop or a coupon code. It lets you shop more intelligently as well and should help to limit those impulse buys, something I'm trying to improve. So it's really useful to get these email and push notification alerts when things come back into stock. As if that wasn't enough, Karma will actually scan the web for coupon codes and apply them automatically. You'll need to get the Chrome extension for this one, linked in the description below, as it's a desktop exclusive feature. Download Karma using the first link in the description below, or the link on your screen now to shop more intelligently in 2021. Back to the video though. Let's kick the parts off by looking at the CPU, the RAM and the motherboard. For the CPU or the processor, I've gone for the AMD Ryzen 5 1600. They have got a newer version of this chip out called the 1600 AF, but that's quite difficult to find at the moment. This Ryzen chip is going to do the job nicely with 6 cores, 12 threads, and a good bit of overclocking if that's something you wanted to do. It also gives good upgrade paths for future Ryzen processors, or allows you to swap the GPU out for a more powerful card later and avoid too much bottlenecking. I'm going to be pairing it up with a 16GB kit of XPG's Gigabyte D20. It's got a fast 3600 MHz speed, and we've gone for 2 DIMMs, not one, which Ryzen appreciates. Sadly, it's not RGB, what are we gonna do? But for a budget build like this, it's the best option out there. Finally then, for these 3 components, the motherboard is the last up, and this is a Gigabyte B450M S2H. It's gonna do a great job, especially for the budget builder out there. Let's go ahead and get these components installed into the motherboard before moving on to the CPU cooler and the SSD choice for today's system. This motherboard is super basic, and in an ideal world, you would get a newer B550 board from someone like Gigabyte. But this board does have all of the different features we need and isn't going to negatively impact on the performance, which is obviously the most important bit. 2 RAM DIMM slots is going to be enough, especially if you opt for 16GB from the very beginning. I wouldn't go for 8GB and fill up both RAM DIMM slots, as it is going to negatively impact your future upgrade options. The cooler then is the next thing we're going to cover. This is the AMD Ryzen stock cooler, and it's one of the huge advantages of going for a Ryzen chip. Intel do include a stock cooler with some of their processors, but they're just not very good. This thing is going to do an awesome job. If the cooler is brand new, you will get pre-applied thermal paste, so no worry about needing to apply your own, but because I've reused the cooler before, I'm just going to drop a fresh dab on. The cooler then will really nicely slot through the motherboard holes really simply and screw into place corner by corner. Don't forget to plug up the CPU cooler's fan cable as well, so that our fan can spin away and keep the processor nice and cool. Once we've done that, the motherboard assembly, as we tend to call it, is pretty much done. There is just one more component to go, and that is the storage. Now, if you wanted to save another $10, $15, you could go for a standard SATA SSD, like the one I'll link in the card section now. I'd recommend though you pick up a 500GB M.2 drive. It doesn't need to be PCIe Gen 4 or anything fancy. Something like the Seagate Barracuda 510 will do a fantastic job. It gives you plenty of fast storage and makes sure that the SSD is not the bottleneck in a system. Great as well if you end up upgrading the graphics card and you need a bit more storage bandwidth. Safe to say as well, an SSD will make the system a whole load quicker in day-to-day use, and that is actually really quite important. And with that done, we can go ahead and move the motherboard assembly over into the case choice for today. This is the Cooler Master MB320Al, and it's one of the best budget chassis out right now. In fact, it might just be the best. With a mesh version available, but good airflow on both, included addressable RGB fans, and a price point that simply cannot be beaten, it deservedly featured in our recent top 5 case roundup video, which you can find in the card section now. It really is an awesome budget chassis and will work very well for today's system. We can go ahead and install our motherboard just like so, but don't forget to install the rear I/O shield, which is where your ports go at the back of the case. Once you've done that, you can screw the motherboard in, try and do it kind of corner by corner, screw by screw, don't over tighten things, just take things nice and easy and you'll be good to go. And with the motherboard in, there's just one component left to go before we move on to the graphics card. That is, of course, the power supply. I've picked up Cooler Master's MWE500. It's a budget power supply that I trust. Make sure you go for one with good reviews from a name brand and just be on the safe side, really. We're going to install it into the back of the chassis, a little something like this, before plugging in the motherboard power cable on the right-hand side of our board and the CPU power cable on the top left-hand side to make sure everything is juiced up and ready to go. And once the power supply is in, we can move on to the graphics card. Now, at this point, some of you are going to be asking questions. Half of you are probably going, James, only a 1660 Super? And the other half of you are probably going, James, how have you fit a 1660 Super in? Well, on the second-hand market, you can find some decent options when it comes to 1660 Supers. Obviously, they're way more expensive than what they were 18 months ago, but I think we all know that by now. By saving as much money as possible in the rest of the build with budget components that still perform well, it gives us a fairly hefty chunk of money left for the GPU. More budget options include something like a 1650 Super or even a GT 1030, which we featured in a recent $600 build that's been quite popular but also a bit controversial in the card section now. This 1660 Super though has 6GB of video memory and gets fairly close to the last generation 2060 in terms of performance. This MSI card is nice with a couple of fans, some RGB and a few bells and whistles, but any 1660 Super you can find at a decent price, new or used, from a reputable seller is what we'd go for. The difference in performance of this and something like, you know, a one-fan Gigabyte card is not really going to be that great. So just see what you can find. As far as performance goes, this is also going to be really solid at 1080p with some leverage at 1440p too. But hang about because in under 60 seconds, we're going to cover the exact performance we were able to achieve with this card in this PC. Let's go ahead and pull back the retention clip on our top PCIe slot and then slide the GPU into place. There's plenty of room left in the case as well, so that if you wanted to upgrade to a 3060, say, in a year's time when the market's back to normal, you can absolutely do so. All that's really left to do then is to screw in our GPU, whack our side panels on, and boot the system up to see how good it looks when it's all powered up, and of course, how well it performs. In typical GeekaWhat style though, roll that montage, and I'll see you in just a second. Lovely jubbly, now we've seen how good the system looks, let's see how well it performs. As ever, here on the GeekaWhat channel, we've tested out a load of the biggest and most popular titles out there to get a really consistent performance picture so that you guys can build this at home and really know what to expect. We're going to look at our focus titles and dive into GTA 5 first of all. At 1080p high settings, we got 118 frames a second, tested out in the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, making it super easy for you guys to run the benchmark mode on your own PCs and compare the results. Visually, the game looked great, no lag, no stuttering, no screen tearing, or anything nasty like that. Call of Duty's Black Ops Cold War is next up, and at 1080p in the game's Zombies mode at high settings, we got 85 frames per second on average. All of our frame rates tested as ever with both MSI Afterburner's Riva Tuner and of course Nvidia FrameView. Apex Legends is the next title today, one of the most popular battle royales that has stood the test of time, and at 1080p high settings we got over 130 frames a second on average. Really not a bad result, and these kind of frame rates at high settings give you lots of legs for tuning down the visual fidelity and increasing the frame rate even further. If frame rate's something you like though, our next game is the one for you. It is of course Valorant. At 1080p high settings, pretty much maxed out, we got 205 FPS on average, while the 90 and 99th percentile results were strong, in the region of 190 and 175. That is bonkers. The next game is a game that's kind of the opposite of Valorant when it comes to frame rate. It is, of course, Cyberpunk. Now, you might wonder why we're testing Cyberpunk out. It's just stupendously buggy, super hard to run, but still very popular, and a good test of a graphics card. At 1080p high settings, we got 60 FPS on average, just about, with 55 and 50 for the 90 and 99 percentile results. And while, of course, you've got no DLSS or ray tracing support on these GTX cards, you need an RTX card for that, the game visually was still very, very playable. That brings us on then to the final title today, Fortnite. At 1080p competitive settings, so everything tuned down to low but the render distance set to far, we got just under 190 frames a second on average. Visually, the game looked pretty good considering it was on low visual fidelity, and these numbers are super impressive. Esports level frame rates on this budget build. If you enjoyed this video though, make sure to give it a big old like rating, get subscribed, thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.